Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Professor Ming's Strategic Insights. I'm sure everybody has noticed that what happened on February the 28th in the White House when President Zelensky met with President Trump and Vice President Vance, and how they end up in a fight, a very serious fight. I'm sure that surprised everybody, including myself. And that ended up in the failure to sign the mineral deal. Officially, the deal is entitled a bilateral agreement establishing terms and conditions for a reconstruction investment fund for both the United States and Ukraine. Well, as I see it, although it ends up in a stalemate, but there is a possibility for the signing of this deal. But it's gonna happen sometime in the future anyway. That's my gut feeling. The question is, it doesn't matter whether there's a signing or not of the deal. Anyway, Trump has officially intervened in the Ukraine war. So the Ukraine war has entered into a new stage or a new phase. I'm not going to talk about what would happen to the war or to the deal. The question I'm going to concentrate on today is how Beijing look at it. How Beijing looks at it, or what's Beijing to take of it, and how they're going to respond to it. Since the war has entered into a new stage or a new phase, it breaks away from Beijing's original calculation and strategy. As we mentioned before, Beijing's original calculation of the war is like this. There are several points to be considered. The first one is Beijing was hoping, or has been hoping, the war would become a protracted one. It'll prolong for months and years, or even a little bit longer, so that Beijing could have a leisure time to handle it. And that's point number one. Point number two, we said that Beijing is adopting a strategy of using the lower-ranking horse to run against or to compete against the top-ranking horses of the king and of the royals. That's how we cited the author of the Arts of War, Sun Tzu, and how he helped his master to win the horse with a score of 2-1, and then end up in winning. That's the second consideration of Beijing. The third consideration on Beijing's part is how to use this war to wear out the strength or wear out the national capabilities of the United States, European countries, and even Russia, so that Beijing could stay away from their attention, and they would probably lose attention. Beijing would be out of the way, and then Beijing would get a room to develop its capability just in case when they need it sometime in the future. So out of that consideration, Beijing managed to help Russia to prolong the war and to fight the war a little bit better on the Russian side by buying more oil or petroleum and natural gases, minerals, and so on and so forth from Russia, and to sell more chips, more dual-use commodities, and more daily supplies to Russia, and so that it can help Russia in that way. And of course, diplomatically, Beijing has been trying to help out Russia in many international occasions. And if everything goes well for them, for both Beijing and Moscow, and what's on Xi Jinping's mind is, if opportunity offers itself, he'll seize it. And then he'll attack Taiwan and incorporate Taiwan when the time comes. And lastly, in order to weaken or to undermine the United States, Beijing started a propaganda war against the United States. They've been accusing the United States, attacking the United States of how the United States does not really want peace, how the United States want to instigate the war, how the United States want to prolong the war by sending more arms, more weapons to Ukraine, and so on and so forth. But anyway, now then, as we pointed out before, if Trump has officially entered into this war, has intervened in the war, and pushing for a ceasefire, if not for a complete peace, then anyway, the war will come to a stop for a moment at least. So what will happen? So that means all the calculation on the Beijing side don't work. At least it'll stop working. It's not the thing does not happen as they wished. So the biggest fear on Beijing side emerges now. That is, they cannot rule out the possibility that Trump is plotting something big. He may be thinking of join hands with Russia and turn against China, turn against Beijing. And then there's a possibility that Putin will take it. Will probably join hands with Trump. And then that's what they call a reverse Nixon card. And that's the biggest fear for Beijing at this moment. And this is something that we need to talk about. So now the big question is, if the possibility of a coalition between the United States and Russia, and the purpose for that coalition is to deal with Beijing. So what can they do? What can Beijing do facing this kind of a dilemma? Well, the thing can be divided into several parts or into several sub-questions. Sub-question number one is how to deal with Russia at this moment or at this juncture. So as we see it, Xi would do as much as he can to ingratiate himself with Putin, and so that he can woo him, he can keep Putin on his, he could keep Putin on his side. So we saw that he accepted the visit of Sergei Shoigu, the defense minister from Russia, and they had a warm conversation, and then they said some nice things about each other in public. And secondly, Xi Jinping went out to public and shouted the propaganda at Putin by saying that we're close allies. We've been good friends for many years and many decades, and we cover each other. We have covered each other's back for so many years. We have a very robust friendship, and in terms of our cooperation, there's no ceiling to it, and all kinds of good things about how he would enjoy his relations with Russia and with Putin himself. And then they even go as far as saying that, well, in early May, on May the 8th, Xi Jinping, will pay a visit to Moscow to participate in a ceremony celebrating the Victory Day, the victory against Nazi invasion. So I'll participate all kinds of ceremonies and to help you out. And that's what's going to happen in May. And of course, reciprocally, Putin says, well, I will visit Beijing sometime in August or in September when you celebrate the 80th anniversary of fighting against Japanese invasion. And I'll be there. So we're an alliance of blood. And that's how they say it. And of course, in addition to the diplomatic gestures, Xi Jinping says that I will buy more oil from you, I'll buy more natural gases, minerals, and raw materials, farm produces, and more meat from you. And I'll sell you more chips, more dual uses supplies, and data supplies. Anyway, Xi Jinping will try very much, even go out of his way to keep Russia on his side and make sure that Russia does not change its mind about their relations. Xi Jinping does not want to be isolated or be left in cool. Xi Jinping does not want to end up in nothing. So he has to stay in the game, and keeping Putin on his side is probably the best way to do it. So the second question is how Xi Jinping is going to deal with Trump, or deal with the United States. The major worries about the United States on Xi Jinping's part is how to deal with this possible coming trade war or tariff war. And then the ongoing strategic containment by the United States against China, so how he should deal with them. So in order to deal with these questions, he has to prepare for war. First, a preparation for a tariff war is coming, is on the horizon. And second is to prepare for the possibility of an probably eventual military conflict sometime in the future. So he has to prepare for these wars. As for the negotiations or the talks between the United States and Russia, which happened a few days ago, on the surface, Xi Jinping would have to say, well, this is a good idea. So he has to praise it. He has to show support for it. Otherwise, he'll be the one sabotaging the peace talk efforts. And that's not a good image for him. So he has to show that. But deep down inside, he doesn't want the peace to be true, to be reality. Like I said, like I pointed out before, Xi Jinping wants to see the war become a protracted one so that he could develop himself and without being noticed, and then eventually use the capability to achieve his own purpose. So if it's at all possible, he will try to undermine the peace talks, or at least the effort to reach peace among all these participants, or even to the point of sabotaging it, if he can do that. But on the surface, he's very, very careful. He's very prudent not to enrage Trump, because he knows that Trump is a tough guy, is somebody you don't want to see him get angry. Anyway, so basically that's his strategy toward the United States and toward President Trump on this issue. If things get out of hand and out of his control, and there's no other way to go, Xi Jinping will probably use Taiwan as a leverage, as a chess piece to check against the United States by starting another military exercise against Taiwan, or even to the point of conducting a blockade against Taiwan, or creating what we call the fifth Strait crisis, or fifth Taiwan Strait crisis. Using that as a chip or as a leverage to fight against the United States. The third part of Xi Jinping's calculation on the issue is toward the European countries. The main purpose on the Chinese side or on the Beijing side is try to utilize the contradiction between the United States and the European countries, so that since the European countries seem to be agonized by Trump or by the United States, so Xi Jinping or the Communist China would try to woo the European countries, try to win them over, and so that they can isolate the United States internationally. But it cannot go too far. It cannot be too obvious. Otherwise, it'll enrage Trump, and which is not a good thing, which is not a good idea. So let's just say there's a very limited room for Beijing to utilize the contradiction between the United States and the European countries. And one of the very few policy options Beijing can use is that economy and trade. And that's probably about it. And that's the third aspect. The last one is for Ukraine. How will Beijing deal with Ukraine at this juncture? On the surface, since the deterioration of the relationship between Ukraine and the United States, and there leaves a room for Beijing to maneuver, but probably not as much as they wish. Like I said, Beijing would have to step in. If they don't step in now, they'll probably end up in nothing. So they will have to step in, and they want to have a say in the whole thing to show that they have influence in international politics, and they have a share in the so-called the big power politics, and that's something they want. And on the other hand, at this moment, the Ukraine may want to use China, use communist China as some kind of a card. Trump said to Zelensky, you have no card in your hands. And Zelensky said, well, I don't play cards, but he has to play card games one time or another. So that gives Beijing a room to maneuver, although very limited. Beijing will have to pretend to be neutral, try to play the role of an honest broker in the whole game. But like I said, the room is still limited. But I guess the best shot Beijing could have in this whole thing is to take part or to join hands with other countries to participate in the reconstruction of Ukraine. Ukraine is devastated by the bombardment and by the shelling and everything by the Russians. So they have to rebuild their infrastructure. So building houses, roads, and stations, airports, and so on and so forth. And together with the upstream and the low-stream industries, that's something that Beijing could contribute to the reconstruction of Ukraine. And if the economy of Ukraine has been restored to a certain point, then Beijing would love to buy more minerals, more natural resources, or farming produces from Ukraine. And that's the best shot that they can have. So that leaves us one last question. Should everything goes well, or let me put it this way, it's not really everything goes well. If the card, the reverse, the Nixon card really emerges and really comes through, namely Russia and the United States join hands to deal with China and to check against China. What can China do? Or let me put it this way. Will Putin sell out Xi Jinping sometime in the future? Well, probably yes, but not now. Because it is a good deal for Putin to hold on to Xi Jinping. First is to get more supplies to fight the war and to prolong the war, and to add more cards in his own hand, in Putin's hands for the future. So even just for that purpose, Putin would not turn hostile suddenly toward Xi Jinping. It's not wise for him to do. So we cannot predict the exact time Putin's betrayal against Xi Jinping would happen, but we can predict the conditions. There are two conditions. Condition number one, when Putin considers he has got substantial and real interest or some benefits from the United States or even from Trump himself. And that's condition number one. Condition number two, according to his calculation, if he thinks setting out Beijing could give me more or could yield more interest or return for me, then I'll sell him out. So the conclusion is the alliance between Russia or between Moscow and Beijing is not as robust as they claim. They are, as we see it, an alliance of convenience, and it's temporary. It's based on interest. If that interest vanishes or if interest turns the other way, then the whole thing will change toward the other direction. So this is something that Beijing really has to worry about. And I think that's their major concern at this point of the time. And things may change in the future. So let's see what would happen between Washington, D.C. and Kiev. And then that's probably a very decisive factor, something to be waiting for, something that will happen in the future. So I think that's all I want to share with you today. I hope you liked today's program. And whatever, anyway, if you haven't subscribed it, please subscribe, share it with your friends, and then click the icon bell so that you'll get a simultaneous notification when we have a new program on. And I'll see you next time then. I'll see you next week.